Hello and welcome to the second part of the solution to coding challenge number 26. As promised, this week we will look at how to implement the solution I showed you last week within a Tkinter GUI. In order to do that, we will have to take the code from last week and slightly modify it, including our Tkinter widgets, of course. As you can see here, I have the code already written, and parts of them are in clear. These are the ones which we won't change, and as you can see they contain our iteration to calculate all the permutations, as well as the one to check whether each of the words is contained within the English dictionary or not. Of course, we also have the final loop which associates the definition taken from the dictionary to each of the words we've found. However, let's now go back to the beginning and see what we need to change or implement in order to generate a Tkinter GUI which will allow us to interact with our code. First and foremost, we need to implement 3 lines which import from the Tkinter module, namely import Tkinter as tk, then from Tkinter import ttk, which we've also seen in one of our tutorials, and then from tkinter.ttk import combo box. Of course, then we have our 2 dictionaries, one from the PyDictionary and one from the PyEnchant library, and then we start generating our main root window. So of course we will have root equals tk.tk, then we will give a title to our root window and we can simply call it Reword it, which is the title of this challenge. And finally we will give our root window a geometry of 1280 pixels by 720. Then we will generate and place a label that says select keywords. This will have a font which is Arial 14 bold and a foreground which will be black. We'll place this obviously at x equals 50, y equals 100, and our anchor will be west. We can then next to it generate and place an input box which will be the box in which we insert the word which we want to rearrange and find all the combinations for. Of course, in line 20 we also place our input box at an x of 380, y of 100, and anchor will always be west. Then remember that we want the ability to change the minimum length of the words we want to find, namely 3 or 4 letters. So for this reason we generate and place a label that says minimum word length, and this will obviously have a smaller font size of 10, and then we will generate a minimum length variable called minimum length, and this will be a Tkinter string variable, and finally we will put in a combo box which has a value, or a preset value to be precise, of either 3 or 4, and we will place it at an x of 700, y of 150, and anchor equals center in this case. The standard value for our combo box will be the one with index 1, which means 4. As a final note, in order to make sure that we don't overwhelm our computer with excessively long calculations, especially for the purposes of this tutorial, we could also include an error label and a result label, in which the error label will say that the maximum word length has been exceeded, and the result label will be the one containing the number of words which we found, and we'll see what the text will be later on, but for the time being we will just say it's equal to an empty string. Then we come to our main function, which is the one to actually calculate our results, but we'll skip through this first and go to the end of the code which completes our root window, and then we'll get back to the main function. Carrying on therefore with our root window, we can generate and place a start button, which will be the button which calls the calc combos main function and allows us to initiate the calculation of our results. We can then place 2 progress bars, one for validating the solutions and one for recording the results. This will allow us in real time to understand at what point our code is within the calculation process. Of course, last but definitely not least, we have to run our root.mainLoop command. Now that is basically how to set up our main GUI window. However, we also need to slightly tweak the main function which we saw last week. So let's go back to within the calc combos function and see how this should be edited. First, we have that our word is now no longer given within our code, but will have to be obtained from the input box. We can do it in this way by saying inputbox.get from 1 to end, meaning from the beginning to the end, and then selecting everything except the last value, because the last value will be an empty space. Then we generate the results label and error label texts, which will be simple empty strings for the moment, and then we can say that if the length of the word is greater than 10 characters, this is an arbitrary number which we've set in order to make sure that the coding time doesn't take too long, and we can say that our error label.text will now have a value which will be equal to maximum word length exceeded, please select a shorter word, meaning that the code will not allow us to calculate the results for a word with more than 10 characters. We then have error label.place, and then this will return, meaning that the code won't continue on and won't calculate any results. Then of course we have our minimum length value, which will be the integer value of cb.get. CB is our combo box which we generated in lines 24, 25, 26 and 27, and of course remember that the value we get is a string, so we need to convert it to an integer and then times it by 1 for good measure. Then of course we have our valid words and all permutations lists which come from our original code, and then we need to set the initial value of our two progress bars, meaning pb1 and pb2 values will be equal to 0. And of course we can run a special command called root.update, which will refresh our page and make sure that the progress bars are set all the way to 0. We then have our two iteration loops, and in the second one we of course need to update our progress bar value as we go through assessing each of the possible words. So we'll have pb1.value will be plus equals to 100, which is the maximum value possible, over the length of all possibilities. And of course we run our special command root.update, which will make sure that the progress bar updates its value on the display as well. Then we go ahead, and as a last point, within results 2, we do the same thing in updating our progress bar value, except this time it will be for progress bar 2, so pb2. So we'll have pb2 value plus equals 100 over length of results, and then root.update. As a final note, we want to make sure that on the display we also show how many results we found in total. So we'll have an extra label called results label, and this will be an f string containing the length of the results and then solutions found. And this we can place at an x of 640, y of 650, and anchor equals center. Now we've had a quick glance at all the various pieces of code which we've written out for this solution. For today though, we can close the explanations here and run the code by pressing the F5 key. And you can see that here we have our GUI window. It will have a title called Reword It, and then here we can write our selected word. For example, tutorial. Given that we often do tutorials here, or better still, we can say Python, which will be our first word, and then we have a minimum word length which we can select as being either 3 or 4, and by default, as we specified, the default value will be 4. Then we have our calculate button, which if we press, you can see it validates all the solutions and then runs the recording results part. This obviously takes a little longer because we are writing each of the values to our txt file, but at the end you will see that in the bottom we will have a label that says X number of words have been found. And there you have it, we've found 6 solutions. And as you can see, here we have the 6 words we found, namely hypo, fot, pony, tony, fon, and typo. Why only 6 when last time we had 7? Well, because this time we don't have the word Python itself. There's no point in saying that Python is a word contained within Python because that's stating the obvious. Now, how did we do that? Well, simply within our code, when we calculated all the possible permutations, we said that the range should be from minimum length, as per last week, to len of word. Of course, we know that the range function doesn't include the last value within the range, so len word will be excluded, which means that we will look for all the permutations up to 5 letters in this case. Permutations with 6 letters, namely Python, will be excluded. Now we can run the code as well for something a little bit more complex, for example, tutorial, given that we often do tutorials on this channel. And if we run calculate, you can see that this time the validating solutions takes longer because there are indeed many more words that can be formed from the word tutorial. And also the recording of these solutions will likewise take a little longer. And there you have it. We have that for the word tutorial with a minimum word length of 4 letters, we have 58 solutions. With that, I will leave you to challenge your friends and see how many words they can get, knowing that you will get them all. Speaking of tutorials, make sure to check out my tutorials on coding in Python. You can find links to these in the top of your screen and in the description down below. As always, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you all again next week for another video. Until then, I wish you a happy week, and as usual, happy coding!